Hello, all my dear cupcakes. We are going to read the novel named Cry Even Better If You Beg Part 3. Be surprised when you see the Duke's shooting skills. He's young, but he's a great marksman. Bill babbled because he thought he had to say at least something to reassure the young girl. But Layla was already on the verge of tears. Why does he like catching birds? There's lots of food in a mansion like that. To the nobleman, hunting is just a form of leisure. Birds are the most interesting targets to shoot at, and Bill once again realized what he had said and turned towards Layla. His eyes were met with Layla's upset face. Why did you have to like birds so much? Bill almost yelled out. He didn't know why he was bothering to explain all these things to her while having to be careful of the child's feelings. Bill ended up keeping his silence because if he said one more word, she looked like she was about to cry. A crying Layla. He hated the sight of crying children. After hesitating, Bill started to walk again. The child followed his footsteps with her shoulders limp. The exact child who was excited to wear her new ivory-colored dress was now nowhere to be found. It had been quite a sight to see her getting so jumpy about a dress she just got. I hope the Duke starts to hate hunting. Plus, the child, who had been silent for a long time, said cautiously, maybe he'll grow bored of hunting? Layla looked up at Bill with eyes full of hope. Bill could only reply by sheepishly scratching the back of his neck. Layla believed her prayers could have been fulfilled. A week after his return, the Duke was nowhere to be seen near the hunting ground. It was understandable because he was busy taking care of the guests who had flocked to the mansion to see him. Every day, there were clamorous gatherings held at the mansion, but the forest was silent. Summer was near its end. Baby birds hatched from the eggs, and the wild roses, which used to be in their early buds, were now in full bloom. Layla happily observed the minor changes that were happening in the forest. Don't go too far, Layla. Bill raised his voice when Layla excitedly left the cabin. Okay, I'm just taking a walk by the river. See you later, Uncle. Layla turned around and frantically waved both her arms over her head. The old leather bag the girl was holding over her shoulder shook along with a jumpy child. Layla was the first to see the recently hatched birds over the tree branch. The hairless baby birdlings were waiting for their mother to bring their food. Layla scurried down from the tree and recorded the baby birds she saw today on a small note taken out from her leather bag. Although the sketches were a bit messy, she tried her best to capture the tiny birds through her drawings. Layla drew and wrote everything she saw in the woods in her little notebook. The land was more beautiful than any other place she had ever lived in. Layla wanted to write down everything so when the time for her to leave the place came, she could recall the memories she had in the forest through her notebook. The thought of leaving the place one day saddened her. As Layla walked along the path leading to the riverside, she steadily recorded the forest. She stuck in pastel-colored flower petals between her notebook pages and picked some strawberries she found on the way. The sun was beginning to set when she reached the glistening riverside. Layla climbed on top of a massive tree that stood at the border of the forest and the river. The thick, lengthy branch of the tree was her favorite spot because it was as comfortable as a chair. Just when Layla was about to open her notebook, faint clatter of horseshoes was heard from afar. Layla hastily shoved her notebook into her bag. In the meanwhile, the galloping sound of the horse came closer. Frightened by the incoming intruder, Layla held her breath while hugging the tree branch she was laying down on. Soon after, a horse with a smooth, dark hazel fur appeared. A man was on its back. Of all places, the man chose to rest his horse right underneath the tree where Layla was on. The man's movements from when he descended from the horse were light and flexible. Layla believed she should come down, but the strange man was already leaning his back under the tree. Not knowing what other excuses to say, Layla simply stared at the man raising his hand to take off his hat. It was at that exact moment when Layla's leather bag slid off her shoulders and hit the branch. The memory of the next moment was vague. The man reflectively turned his head towards the tree branch and met eyes with Layla. Layla gazed upon his eyes. His blue eyes seen through. The thick black hair flowing over his forehead were like transparent glass beads. By the time Layla pulled herself together, the man was pointing his gun towards her face. Layla's face grew pale at the thought of getting shot by the long, threatening gun. Layla, frozen in place, simply hugged the tree for dear life. Her whole body was trembling in sweat. The man slowly gave off a silent sigh and lowered his gun. "What are you?" A low voice streamed through his crooked lips. "Layla." Layla managed to squeeze her voice out, but was on the verge of tears. Her gold hair fluttered in the wind. "What?" His eyes narrowed further. Layla hugged the tree so hard that her fingertips began to hurt. "Layla. Layla Llewellyn. Uncle. Uncle Bill. Uncle." Layla's voice rang out in the woods. Bill was sitting in front of the cabin warehouse. He turned his head in bewilderment at Layla's frantic call. Layla rushed towards him with a crimson-red face. "What's the matter?" There's a man in the woods." He was tall. Despite her shortness of breath, Layla was about to explain her encounter with the strange man. "You must have met the Duke who came out hunting," Bill retorted as he picked up his tools from the warehouse. His hair was black and his eyes were really blue. His voice was light as a feather. "It's Duke Herhard without a mistake." Bill snarled with laughter. Layla stood in front of Bill for a long time, trying to catch her breath. The beautiful but scary man stared at Layla for some time and had turned away without saying a word. When he got back on his horse, 2 other men appeared from the deep forest. The man turned his horse to join the other 2 men as they drifted further into the woods. When they were no longer visible, Layla climbed down from the trees and fled to the cabin. Then the Duke. When Layla was able to say something, a cold shot rang out, shaking the calmness of the forest. Layla was startled and she turned her head towards the direction of the sound. Surprised birds arose from the far side of the forest. One of the surprised birds fell into the trees, with its wings drooped helplessly. The shots went on a few more rounds. Bill gave Layla a pat on her shoulder in an effort to calm the scared girl. "Layla." Layla slowly raised her head. When their eyes met, Bill unconsciously held his breath. The child was crying. The beautiful bird slaughterer. That was the title Layla Llewellyn decided to give him. All the people of this estate, even Bill Remmer, praised him for being a perfect aristocrat. People seemed to care and love Matthias von Herhard, who had outstanding qualities as the owner of this land. But Layla did not agree. Ever since the day the Duke went out hunting, the mother bird disappeared. The baby birds that had recently hatched no longer than their mother to feed them. In addition, countless birds were no longer to be seen. Why did the Duke hunt only small, beautiful birds instead of large birds that are meant to be eaten? 1. Layla, who had been observing and agonizing for over the past month, now seemed to know why. To him, the birds were moving a target. The smaller they were, the more difficult and interesting they were to aim. The Duke did not bother to look at the prey he hit. He simply turned away after hitting his target. On the days he went out hunting, Layla buried the dead birds that were covered in blood. 2. Bang! The gunfire rang once again in the distance. The sun was scorching hot, but the tree shade was cool. Layla sat on a blanket with her arms wrapped around her knees. Bill and the other garden workers were engrossed in digging up the rose tree that had started to wilt. The garden behind the mansion seemed to have roses of all different sorts. The rose was said to be the national flower of the Berg Empire, and the flower that the Duke's mother and grandmother adored. Due to another day of gunshots coming from the forest, Layla wandered nervously around the cabin. Uncle Bill had seen her nervous state and decided to bring her out into the garden. Her mind was put to rest when the sound of gunshots faded away. Is it really okay for me to rest when Uncle Bill is working under the burning sun? Layla uncomfortably looked at Bill. She slowly closed her eyes and let out a small sigh. Uncle Bill threatened to get angry if she helped him. He told her he hated children who don't listen. Even though Layla's Heart wasn't at ease. She decided to wait for him until he finished his job. When Layla opened her eyes again with resignation, she was startled by an unfamiliar boy standing in front of her. The neatly dressed boy looked like he was around Layla's age. "Hey!" When their eyes met, the boy greeted her with a lovely smile. He was a boy with charming platinum hair. "You live here?" The boy looked around and asked solemnly. "Yeah, with Uncle Bill." Layla answered as she squinted her eyes. "Mr. Bill? You mean that scary gardener guy?" "He's not scary." "Really? Seems scary to me." The boy tilted his head and casually took a seat next to Layla. "Do you live here too?" Layla asked with caution. The boy smiled and shook his head. "Nah, I followed my father. He's the family doctor at the Herhard household. He's here to give Madame Norma a medical examination. I come here with my father sometimes." Madame Norma said it was. "Okay. 1. I see. How old are you?" 12. "Same. But you're kinda small." The boy staring at Layla began to laugh. Layla's cheeks started to flush, bright red in fury. "You're small too. I'm the tallest in my class though." The boy stretched out his back to prove his tall height. He certainly looked a little taller than his age. "Anyways, you're still shorter than Uncle Bill," Layla whispered softly. The boy giggled again at Layla's words. He seemed like a happy-go-lucky child. "Hey, it's impossible to find a kid or even an adult taller than Mr. Bill." "I'm not so sure about that." Layla picked at the grass growing near the blanket for no reason. Her delicate fingers slowly tainted green. She wished the boy would quickly go away, but he showed no signs of getting up. "Do you want some?" Layla, who then focused her attention on the peach sitting at the edge of the blanket, asked impulsively. The boy gladly nodded. Layla took out a pocket knife from her leather bag. The boy snickered at the sight of Layla gently cutting the peach. "You're funny. Why is a knife coming out of a girl's bag?" "Don't make fun of me. Uncle Bill gave it to me." Layla slightly wrinkled her nose in annoyance as she gave the half-cut peach to the boy. The sweet scent of the peach pulp tingled too. Children's noses. "Why do you look so down? Did something happen?" the boy carefully asked after he gulped down his peach. "The Duke and his friends keep hunting down birds," Layla somberly answered. The boy titled his head, wondering what the issue was. "What about it? They're murdering birds for their own enjoyment. Isn't that how hunting works? Do you think so too?" Layla cut another peach in the boy's cheeks. Started to flush as he tried to fix his uncomfortable color. "Kyle. Kyle." A faint voice was heard. The boy, who was fiddling with the dead peach seed, sprang to his feet. "I have to go now." "Okay. Bye, Kyle Ettman." The boy held out his hand. "My name. What about you?" "I'm Layla. Layla Llewellyn." Layla awkwardly shook his hand. With their small hands covered in sticky peach nectar, the two shook hands as if they were making a truce. "Bye, Layla. See ya. I'll bring you something more delicious next time," the boy shouted as he dashed away in the distance. Layla simply gave out a small wave because she was unsure if she could see him again if she ever stayed in this estate. When Kyle left, Layla's world was at peace again. While taking a whiff of the rose-scented breeze, Layla patiently waited for Uncle Bill to finish his work. But at some point, she had fallen asleep and opened her eyes to Uncle Bill calling her name at sunset. Layla rose up from her seat, carried her bag, and picked up the blanket. "Uncle Bill, I saw a kid." When Layla was about to tell her encounter with the boy who she shared her peaches with, she was interrupted by silhouettes of people walking out from the other side of the forest. It was Duke Herhard and his friends. Matthias paused in the center of the rose garden. The blunt gardener, Bill Remmer, was there bowing his head towards the Duke. It was not long before Matthias realized that there was a tiny child hiding behind the gardener. "Long time no see, Mr. Remmer." Matthias lightly nodded. His acquaintances that were with him during his hunting sessions stopped behind the Duke at a moderate distance. "She's going to be staying here at Arvis for the time being," Bill Remmer informed the Duke with a slightly uncomfortable look. When Bill tapped the girl's back to come forward, the girl hesitatingly took a step towards the Duke. Thanks to her sparkling blonde hair, Matthias was able to recall who the child was. The girl who he almost shot. The absurd little girl who almost got shot for being thought of as a bird. I've already received approval from Madame Norma and Madame Alice, but I believe I should ask for your approval as well. Bill Remmer bowed his head once again. The child standing beside him bowed along. Matthias slowly glanced at the child. When they exchanged looks, the child frowned at him. Thin scowled eyes and clamped lips. Her expression was the exact same when they first met in the woods. You're that girl. The girl who lives in the forest. Matthias's cousin, Riette, snickered from behind. The red-faced child hid behind the gardener's back in embarrassment. The girl he occasionally met in the forest was like that as well. As soon as she stared into the Duke's eyes in wonder, she hid behind the tree. And after Matthias had finished hunting, she always came out from behind and buried the dead bird's point one. Sure, if that's what you want, Mr. Remmer. Matthias gave a brief answer with a grin. Whatever the gardener raised in the forest was none of his business. Thank you, my lord. Bill gave him his thanks. After Matthias's chin ever so slightly nodded at Bill, he began to move. After the Duke passed the gardener and the girl by, Layla flinched at the sight of Matthias's servants following him with their hands full of hunted animals. The deep, unpleasant scent of blood ran through the girl's nose. Layla's shoulders hunched and she closed her eyes. Uncle Bill's large, warm hands patted Layla's frail shoulders. Claudine let out an exaggerated sigh with her chin rested on the palm of her hand. Her curled brown hair bounced along to the beat of her constant sighs. Countess Brandt glanced at her daughter with her thin eyebrows. Claudine, behave like a lady, please. The Countess's inarticulate voice grew in impatience. Although Claudine was rather too young to be called a lady, she was soon to be the Duchess of Arvis. Claudine's mother let out a long sigh at her daughter's immature attitude. But I'm so lonely and bored, Claudine grumbled. The other noble women who were drinking tea at the tea table turned their eyes at the upset brunette girl. Then go play with your cousins. Countess Brandt huffed as her face turned crimson red. But Claudine did not bother to notice her frustrated mother. They treat me as if I'm not here. They say things I don't understand. The ladies let out a soft smile at Claudine's annoyed expression. Well, it can be boring. Claudine doesn't have any friends her age. Elise von Herhard nodded as she stroked the white dog sitting on her lap. See? Madame Herhard understands. A lively smile bloomed on Claudine's lip when she found someone who could understand her pain. Who's that child? Claudine suddenly directed her finger towards a garden after glancing at a young girl for some time. All the ladies turned their heads toward the direction Claudine was pointing at. The young girl Claudine was talking about was taking a stroll with a gardener. Can I play with her? I think she's about the same age as me. Well, isn't she an orphan from abroad? That kind of girl isn't suitable to be your friend. I'm fine. I think it'll be more amusing than playing with a dog. Claudine's tone was calm and imposing. She didn't pay any attention to her mother's red ears that were about to burst in embarrassment. Elise von Herhard laughed and happily rang the bell. Bring me that child. A maid arrived at the call of her master's bell. The child the gardener is currently raising. The maid brought Layla to an unknown world. It was a place where fancy people, dressed in candy-sweet colored clothes, sat under the white mansion shade. She's very cute, one of the ladies complimented. What do you say? Do you like it, Claudine? One. After examining Layla, the black-haired woman turned over to the chestnut-haired girl sitting beside her. The girl, named Claudine, smiled happily and nodded. Thank you, Madame Herhard. Layla blankly stared at the people in front of her. She wasn't sure what the ladies were conversing about. She just wanted to get back to Uncle Bill's cabin, but no one seemed to notice her desperate desire. When one of the ladies murmured an order, the maid held Layla's hand and dragged her into a room. Layla had washed herself in a fancy bathroom for the first time and wore clothes that were surprisingly soft and white. The maid roughly combed her messy hair, but Layla endured the pain. She believed if she said something wrong, she would risk Uncle Bill's job. Lady Claudine is the daughter of Count Brandt. You shouldn't act recklessly in front of her. Do you understand? The maid who dragged Layla into the second floor of the mansion sternly warned Layla. Layla dazedly nodded. The maid cautiously opened the door of the drawing room. Claudine had greeted them with a posh attitude. Hello. What's your name? Age. Claudine lowered her head and attempted to make an eye contact with Layla. Layla Llewellyn. I'm 12 years old. Really? I thought you were younger since you're so small. Bye bye all my dear cupcake. See you in next video.